So when the class of Mayim Rabbim, we've learned the Maimer a few times. There's 3 Maimarim really, or 4 Maimarim on Parshas Noach. 3 of them are around the concept of Mayim Rabbim, the idea of anxieties of life, and the 4th one, which you've learned last year, is the Maimer on the Tower of Babel. Okay, so the Maimer says this is a pasuk in Shirim. Shana, we're starting now. We've learned this Maimer before. It's a pasuk in Shir Shirim. It says like this: Mayim Rab Yuchlu. Hey, welcome back, Adam. So we've learned this Maimer before. This is Mayim Rabbim LaYuchlu L'Chabes. We're in Shir Shirim, the first Maimer of Noach. So Mayim Rabbim LaYuchlu L'Chabes Sa'ava. The raging waters or the plenty of waters can't put out the love. And we're not going to get drowned by the rivers. The person's going to give all their all that he had. So Vaizu is the actual translation. We've had it in the it's translated in English over here that it is the property. If should a man give all the property of his house for love, they would despise him. But we'll see what that all means. Not holding the second part, we're going to first go into the first part, which is the Mayim Rabbim. The Maimer says like this: what are these raging waters? What are these plenty waters? These are all the concerns, tirdos, and tirdos means concerns, anxieties of a person earning a parnasa, earning a living in general. And he adds v'hamachshavas, like a vase, which is that, and the thoughts that are overwhelming in this world. So not just the parnasa, but all things, all anxieties that are of happenings, social, could be political, whatever it is that's really sitting on a person that could drown a person and not allow a person to be productive, specifically in Avodas Hashem, in our service of God. Nevertheless, the pasuk continues. Shlomo Melech says, all these waters, moving waters, raging waters, cannot put out the love a person has for Hashem, because the love a person has for Hashem is so deep that the waters don't touch them. And the point is how we deal with the conflict. So why? He says, because the love is the hidden love. Mesoteris means hidden. That's naturally in every Jewish person. It's not something that we earn, even so to say. It's the fact that we were born as a Jew, of a child of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, gives us naturally a natural love for Hashem. And this comes from because every Jew has a godly soul. And the nature of the godly soul, shetiva, the nature of the godly soul, is la'alois, is to elevate, to try to constantly include itself above, meaning in a spiritual realm. He shall have this just like a flame that goes up on its own. So to the nature of the godly soul, which is in every Jew, and therefore that love is there, is naturally wanting and yearning to go to its creator, to its source. As the verse says in Shir Hashirim, 2 verses before, in Pasuk Vav, shall have as Yudke, that it's a flame of fire, that is a flame of Yudke, of godliness. That the flame, the natural flame of a Yid, the neshama, is like a flame that goes upwards, that wants to include itself in the fire of Hashem. Shehur b'chinas shall have as haba milmayla. This is a flame that comes from above. And what does that mean if it comes from above? She nefesh al-kis. This is the godly soul that's given to a person. Because as it works, before the soul comes into a physical body in this world, the soul was in existence. It took in the ray of the Shechina. And it was one, in an absolute oneness, with infinite light. So before, it means to say is that the nefesh al-kis, which is an interesting concept, not just because the nefesh al-kis is the concept of reincarnation, so it existed before. But even aside from that concept, there's an existence of the godly soul prior to it going to the body. It means we know that everything is a creation, and so to the creation of the souls. But the souls are created as an entity first, and eventually they come down whether it's in a time or a situation, it comes down into the specific body. And that moment when the soul has been created and has become, sits within the holiness of godliness, it is connected and it's one with godliness and infinite light and all in goodness and all that. So therefore, because it had that before, it had an existence before, and that existence was an existence of kedusha, of holiness, connection with godliness, with the infinite light, with the highest level of godliness. So therefore, because it had that experience before and it knows it, even after it's been exiled, so to say, even for a reason, but it's been descended into a body and into no longer the reality that it was prior to being born. So therefore, even after it comes into a guf, hagashmi, a physical body, and what is the purpose of being in a physical body? One of the things is lasik binyanim gashmi. Part of the deal is that you're going to be involved and preoccupied and focused on material things. Binyanim gashmi. Shehem hanikrai mayim rabbim, like we said before, these physical things could turn into mayim rabbim, and they do. Anxiety, social anxiety, again, financial anxieties, but this is the anxieties of life, the worries of life. Is in kol zeh. So nevertheless, because it had an existence before, and in that space there was no mayim rabbim, it was just the godly soul with godliness. So in kol zeh, nevertheless, while it's experiencing the difficulties of life, and there's a reason for it, we're going to get to the purpose of why, obviously, of why the soul comes into this world, is nevertheless, but the fact is, can't put out the flame, the natural urge and wanting that the soul has for godliness. That the godly soul constantly, the spark constantly has a level of love with shukra and a desire, nifla, which is a great desire, la'alais, that to elevate, to ascend, to be included as it was before. Now here comes the point. On the contrary, not only can't the fire put out, the raging waters put out the fire, on the contrary, when the soul comes down into the goof, into the nefesh bahamis and the goof, to the animal and the physical material world. And in that is all the Mayim Rabbim, Anal, which was mentioned before. Only then can the soul reach the highest of levels, even more than it did before it came down to this world. As we explained, this is the basic idea that this every Yerida has a tzarech aliyah. We're not trying to get back to go. Right? We're not trying to go leave this world and get back to where we were, because then there's no purpose in our being created. So there's 2 points here. The point number one is that there's a purpose in creation. So one might think that if we accomplish something in this world for the greater good of, let's say, Dir B'Tachtonim, right, that there should be a resting place for Hashem, right? Avram, we learned this week, Avram goes around and calls out the godliness. It means brings awareness and reveals godliness within the world. But that doesn't necessarily require, or it doesn't seem to be a condition that the soul has to elevate in that experience. It means it could be that we're in a very high space and a tremendous strengths and potential. We come down to this world, we accomplish something, we go back to where we were. It doesn't mean that we have to gain something from this exercise. The world gains, God gains, creation gains, revelation gains. But who says there's a personal gain in it? Maybe not. Maybe we go back to where we start from. So here the Alter Rebbe, this is one of the fundamental points, is that they go together. It doesn't work like that. That if there's a Yerida, it's not just that we're accomplishing something and we get back to where we start from, hopefully. But there has to be an aliyah with ourselves also. We get an elevation, which is the message also of Lech Lecha. Avram becomes who he is when he goes out to the world. He says, V'hinei, V'chinis Mayim Rabbim Hanal, this experience of going into the Mayim Rabbim, of the raging waters, which is called Nikra Mei Noach. These are the waters of Noach. As it says in the verse in Yeshaya, Asher nishbati ma'avra mei Noach al haaretz, the God made a covenant never again to bring the waters of Noach on the world. Hey nishbati miktzayf alayich u'migarbach. So too God makes other promises about whether it's in the negative, but so too he also promised that he'll never bring the mei Noach again. Kihine, Noach, what does it mean, Noach? The name Noach is from the word nachas, from the word calmness. Who naicha deruchat.
You know what? I didn't catch what you said. Bring something again at the end of that paragraph.
No, it says Yeshaya Navi in chapter 54 says, verse 9. Asher nishpati ma'avra mei Noach oid al haaretz. God said He's not going to bring the waters of Noach again. Ke nishpati miktzoif alayich umigarbach. So too, I promised. Miktzoif is from the word ketzef, is anger, and to migarek, to push you, it means to be negative on you. So God made a covenant not to destroy the Jewish people. I mean, this is the covenants God made with mankind. So, but we see here that the point that the Alter Rebbe is bringing out is that the waters are not called waters of the Mabel; they're called waters of Noach. It means the waters are attributed to Noach. So we see here that there's the concept that the water itself has a menucha in it, even though the water is. The point Alter Rebbe is trying to bring out here is not just that you're surviving the Mei Noach, but the Mei Noach elevates you. That there's an elevation, the soul itself gains from the waters of Noach. That's why he calls it Noach's waters as opposed to negative water. Could have called it flood waters, but we call it Mei Noach because there's a positive to these waters, which brings the soul to an elevation. And that's the whole point of the Mayim. The word Noach means to calm the spirit, or calmness. Shvisa also means to rest. As if a person would rest from their labor, from working, like it says, God rested on the seventh day. And the Targum Uncle says, V'nach, Yishbais means to rest in a way of menucha b'yem on the seventh day. Mashakasav Noach beis pamim. Right? It says Eil told us Noach. Why does it say 2 times Noach? Because it tells us that there's Nachat Leila, Nachat Tata. There's a calmness that is given to above, and a calmness that's given to below. Shabbos, like those are the 2 levels of Shabbos, because Shabbos is also called Noach, like it says V'yishbais b'yem hashvi, v'nacha b'yem hashvi. That there's Shabbos in this world, there's Shabbos from creation, and there's a Shabbos Eilah. In the higher spheres is the concept of Shabbos, which the highest level of Shabbos is going to be lost when Mashiach comes, which is Yom Shekuli Shabbos, that everything is going to be Shabbos, not just.
I can't help but think of what's going on today. I mean, people are literally being slaughtered, and their soul is going up. Is that the rest? And the rest of us who are left behind to suffer knowing what happened?
No. That's already more complicated. I'm not going to comment on that to know what the purpose of this person going through what they went through. And there's obviously Mirz Hashem. Anyone who dies Mesiras Nefesh Al Kiddush Hashem goes straight under the Kisei HaKavod. So there is a concept of menucha for that individual soul. But hopefully what this is all about is to get us to this Shabbos Ilah, the menucha of L'Asid, where there's all menucha, not just a cycle of menucha, because like you're saying is that some stayed and some left. So if you're viewing the being here as being tormented, not yet in the menucha of Noach, that's part of the cycle, like within people also. So some people, there's 6 days of the week and the Shabbos, but we go back to the 6 days of the week. So it's not a complete menucha. So too in people, it's not a complete menucha. But I'm not. At the end, obviously, the soul is in a peaceful place now, but I'm not sure that I'd call it as a positive thing, because it wasn't positive how they died and why they died. But when Mashiach comes, it's b'yom shekul Shabbos. Mashenkin Shabbos tata, ain't kul Shabbos kasheis bar, but that's only Shabbos ilah. That's all Shabbos. But when in our world, it's a cycle of Shabbos. It's not all Shabbos, like we just said. Hearing the chura ain't moving in her mabel here, but again, what the Alter Rebbe is, the point of this mimer is that the waters are called Mei Noach, means the waters of calmness, because although the raging waters and stress a person out, it's through the stress, dafka, that you get this aliyas neshama, that the neshama gets its elevation, where the purpose of creation, not just for the world, but for the individual, gets elevated. So he starts off with the first question, obviously, like we've learned. What's the whole idea of the Mabel in the first place? If the whole purpose of the Mabel was destruction, to get rid of the world and to destroy the world because God is disappointed with the world, right? And there's no positive to the actual experience. Hey Judith, the middle of page 3. There's no actual positive to the experience of the Mabel. To punish the people that sinned. Why did it have to be in such a way? Such a commotion of a large flood, so many days, water, destruction. God is God could have destroyed the world in a second. Just whatever. There's no more ratzin, like we learned on Thursday night. The ratzin for the world is not there anymore. There's no more will. There's no more world. The world is existence because there's a will. Get rid of the will. There's no world. It doesn't have to be a whole process of a flood. So therefore, what's the purpose of the flood? It can't just be to punish. It has to be a positive side. It wasn't just that the flood was coming to destroy the world, to drown out the world, but it was the tahir asarets, to purify the world. Shinemar, as it says, ki amala aretz chamas, that the whole world was full of chamas. Take it all the way, however you want to believe that is. And was very mukulkal, very damaged. And that world, the world needed to be purified. It wasn't a quick fix. You couldn't just fix it and keep it. It had to be an absolute level of purification, like a mikvah. That was by the mavka. The way to do it was through the mavel. Mayim, which is like the waters, which comes to purify the impure. This is how the Rebbe introduces the idea that the mavel is the concept of a mikvah, mem sa, which has to be a measurement of 40 sa, which is a measurement of water, corresponding to the 40 days of the rain. That the 40 sa, if a person immerses himself or herself into a mikvah, then the water of 40 sa minimum will make a person from being impure to pure. It came to purify not just the individual, but the entirety of the world. God dipped the world into a mikvah. It says the Mashiach comes. And God is going to pour water on the world to purify it. And that's why they're called calm waters. Because it's not a destructive water. In the bigger picture, they bring calmness. This brings a calmness of the spirit, because now we go from being an entity of impurity to purity. So that's the story of the flood. How do we apply this to our individual situation? When a person goes through the difficulties, he calls it the word shibud. The word shibud from the word eved. A person enslaved to their parnasa, whether it's real or not real, but we're talking about how the person feels. When you shibud parnasa, means when I say real or not real, sometimes a person is in a situation that's really bad. Sometimes it's not as bad as you feel, but it's not about, it's about each individual in their situation. The enslavement to our finances, to our financial situation, is also called Noach, the waters of Noach. Same idea. Like it says, this is what the Gemara says, I think it's the Gemara, right? And the Medrash Bereshis Rabbah tells us in the story of the vision of Avram at the end of this week's Parsha, that God gave Avram a choice. Does he want his descendants to have hell? Means for everything that we have negative, are we going to we can live this world, but we'll have to, so to say, pay the price eventually in hell, or go through shibud. That same word, shibud. That in shibud comes in many ways. The shibud of parnasa, which is the individual enslavement. There's the shibud when we go into galus, when we go to Mitzrayim, right? But it's all the same idea. It means there's where we could be in a collective shibud or as an individual shibud or collectively, individually. But the idea is that Avram chose shibud. After we've gone to this cycle of the world, the neshama can't go back down, can't go back up to the Garden of Eden, and to now sit back and bask in the ray of Ashchina. You have to go to Gehenna. You have to clean yourself. Means even if you want to say, right, a person may have a taina, a person may say, 1 second, I was in a good place before. Why would I? What was he saying? I had to go down because I had to make a dir b'tachtonim. Okay, and there's wins. We win some, we lose some. But why did I get punished afterwards? So you can't take away the fact. In that experience, you got dirty, and when you get dirty, you have to clean yourself up, and you clean yourself up going through Gehenna. Like it says, right? Acher was a big disappointment. He was a great giant of the Talmud Chacham. He was the teacher of Meir, the contemporary of Rabbi Kiva. He went off the derech. Oh, so why did he go off the derech? He went off the derech not because he just gave in to his pleasures. He saw destruction around him. He saw hurt and pain around him, and he dealt with the pain instead of dealing with pain inwardly. He rebelled. He rebelled against God. He got angry when he saw the pain of people. That's what led him off the way. But at the end of the day is when they asked Meir, his student, who understood his situation, that what should be? Should he just not go to Garden of Eden because he doesn't deserve it? He says no. Mutiv diludainu, let him go to be judged, i.e., go to hell. And let him come into the world to come. It means the world to come, he deserves to go to the world to come. But he has a lot of dirt on him. He went through a tremendous situation, and he has to go to hell to clean himself up. But it's worth it for him to go to hell because of the benefit of the world to come. The God mitzvah, not only that we have to go through hell, we know there's also the concept of being dipped in Nahar Dinar. Nahar Dinar is a fiery water that is another kind of cleansing process that we go through. So too, there's another way, not going through hell, but going through shibud. That by toiling and being enslaved and going through difficulties in this world, we could elevate. So we could find purity within our experiences here. That while we're trying to make a deeper tachlim, the trick is, if there is one, is not to drown. Because if we drown, that means what's it mean to drown? We become non-productive. And we don't try to say, notwithstanding of the difficulties, we go to shul, we have a shir, we teach, we learn, we do mitzvahs, we put on film ourselves and others, we light Shabbos candles. I mean, the idea is that although you're going through the shibud, is to become a lachlecha, is to actually make that switch in your life now, not later, not to have to go through what Acher went through, that he had to go to hell to go to heaven. To take that shibud while it's happening and use it as a fuel to be productive. He says, shibud ain't a pirushma. So now he goes into what's shibud. So you think, what's shibud? Shibud is that we have to be, sitting under power. And shibud ain't a pirushma sheish lenu at melach. That there's a king, to return a mas, and makes us pay high taxes. Why? Because that's alone not a problem. Taxes alone, to have rules is not a problem. Why? Because even in our best times we had to give a lot. Shagam is man based on Mikdash, in the first base of Mikdash, we had a king. It says that Shlomo and David had tremendous taxes. And they had to give 1/10 just to the king. Nevertheless, it wasn't a problem because there was so much abundance that they didn't care about it. But the idea is that there's difficulties when there's not abundance. When the temple was standing, there was so much blessing and flow, calls it ashpat, so much tremendous flow. The Eretz Yisrael was the way it should be, flowing of milk and honey. That was unnatural. The Gemara describes the tremendous blessings even in the second temple of the land of Eretz Yisrael. No one was suffering. I mean, there was obviously poor people. Otherwise, it says Shlomo Melch gave tremendous tzedakah, but it wasn't this normal. It wasn't normal to be in a situation of tirus panasa. So the fact that you had to pay taxes didn't bother anyone. But that's then. But today is yesh lekol echad ve'echad yigias v'tirus panasa. We do have these parnasa issues. Or again. If a person's reading this Mayim and says, you know what, I'm Baruch Hashem doing great. I don't have financial worries. Well, then you have other worries. God forbid. We have to go out there into the world. These are the raging waters. But they're not raging waters of negative, like we said by the Mabul. It wasn't l'shachis because God could have destroyed the world in a second. It was to purify. So too, these waters are called meinayach. Why? There's a purpose to them, to bring calmness to the spirit. Because through a person experiencing, and hopefully it should be for a short time, these Mayim Rabbim, this multiple waters, only through that does the person elevate to the highest levels, even more than how it was before it came down to this world. So like we said before, that it's not just about that Hashem needs the world to have godliness, but there's nothing in it for us, or you want to say you get a schar, you get a reward, that you get sit in Gan Eden. That you actually get benefit, the soul itself gets benefits, gets elevated itself. You're a higher entity than you were before. And part of that experience part of that elevation comes through going through the Mayim Rabbim itself. So therefore, your individual difficulties is actually an individual benefit for you. Because before you were coming down to this world, you were only like an entity that took pleasure in the ziv Shechina, in the ray of the Shechina. Like it says, that's better 1 shah, 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world than everything in the world to come. Why? Because only in this world is it the light that comes through the darkness, the light that comes out through the Mayim Rabbim. That through not allowing ourselves to drown, and we have to go through difficulties of iskafia, restraining ourselves. And restraining ourselves are all taivas, all pleasures that we sometimes want to give into, sometimes we fall into them because of our anxieties, before we try to find comfort in them. Or hisapcha, to transform ourselves. That only happens in this world. Why? So he explains. When a person preoccupies the whole day in trying to earn a living, that's all darkness. And then at the same time, you're able to pull yourself away in the tefillah. That not that it's even more than that. It's not just that when a person says that when the davening is about the parnasa, it's also a madrega. But here is when you could actually pull yourself away and think about the greatness of Hashem. Now, what do you think about? There's no grass. It doesn't have an attention of a mazel above. Nothing happens by chance. Not just collectively, but each individual blade of grass has an intention, a mazel that says you should grow, and you should grow this fast and this high. And you contemplate about the attention of all the energy that goes from the higher levels into the lower levels to give it life. That from the sun and the environment grows all the plants and the growth. I'm sorry, when a person thinks about where is the mazel that gives to each place, comes from the system of the 70 masters, which are for each country. I find him, and the masters get from the angels, from the leftovers of the angels. They get from the angels themselves. How everything comes higher and higher. Everything gets from God's godliness. But God's godliness, His kingship is all over the world. That He creates is constantly the whole world from nothing to something. When you think in davening, then all that's chitzonius. The creation of the world, the continuum of creation of the world, that's only the chitzonius, that's only the ziva shechina. And that's only a ray for the essence of the God, which is infinite beyond being a creator. And is without any change. As it says, God was here before and will be after. The world doesn't change God. God's not about being a creator. And when a person goes into that, loses themselves in this hisbonenus during davening, which means you're leaving the world of their anxieties. You elevate out of that space. When a person contemplates in this, in the depth of their understanding. So what's the response of the person then? It's not, you're already no longer about in those waters. It's not. That's what it says. That what the Baal Shem Tov says. You go into the teva. You go into the ark. The waters lift you up. Faket. You don't get down, then you drown, because if your focus is in the right space, all of a sudden you're getting lifted up to another space. All of a sudden you have an awakening, a feeling. The love comes out. With shuka and a desire. You want to go out of this physical, material space, without the dafka base baruch to cleave, not to the creator, but to the beyond the creator, to the essence of God. Like the Alter Rebbe always used to say, what's with you in heaven, that all the levels that are called imcha, they have no desire for that. All I want is the Eibishter alone. So Yachv's klar, not with the smart, no desire, not motivated by this lower level of Gan Eden, Elyon, I don't care about the higher level of Gan Eden. This is all manifestations. They're sitting there in the basking in the way of Hashem. A person in this world, the attention the ability to have focus of making the right choices of what's really important only comes to the person when they go through this experience. If we never would come down to this world, we wouldn't even know to look deeper than that. We'd be happy. We're sitting there. We're on the beach, right? We're basking in the ray of Hashem. We don't even know there's something greater than that. We're not even aware to look for something greater than that. We're coming into this world. Are we able to focus and pay attention to what's really important? And we don't get inspired. We don't get excited about Gan Eden even, or even the higher level of Gan Eden. Why? Because that's not the essence. We realize we get beyond all the fluff, and we say we want you yourself. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. This is what the Zohar says. The Holy Zohar says that we submit ourselves to the body of the king, meaning the essence. And this is what's called tshuva, not repentance, but return. Which is stronger. Where do we get this attention? Where do we get this ability to understand, to make the right choice, to know what to seek? Is only because we went through experiences of darkness. Because we got perspective of all of the difficulties of life. Because where do you get real light? Only from experiencing situations, unfortunately, of darkness. And that a person reaches the level of love that's with only light. Mamish has no limits. It's not about what's the limits. The limits is I love God to get Gan Eden. That's a limit. And that love can only be aroused within the person from negative, from the opposite. The darkness. Good is the Malach HaChaim, the angel of life. Nothing bad happens. You want Toiv Ma'aid, the Malach HaMavis. That comes through sometimes, unfortunately, the concept of death. Only through darkness. The animal soul, which is all the things that the animal brings the person into. That has no limits. This is because why is it that a person only reaches greatness or only reaches focus through the darkness? He says, at the highest levels. Because the animal soul has within it a power that the godly soul doesn't have. At its core, it's higher than that. It's higher than the godly soul. The godly soul is perfect. It's the tzaddik. But the animal soul that goes through difficulties, goes through taivas, but its source comes from higher, and therefore when it turns, it can take the godly soul to a much higher space. That the kings of Esav, which represent the animal soul, are kings before the kings of Israel. Which the kings of Israel is the godly soul. What happened? In the breaking of the vessels, they fell into the pleasures of this world. Like it says, they were kings and they died. Where they come from, their root, and therefore they have powers that the godly soul doesn't have. Is much higher than the Nefesh Likis. Even as they fall down, they can be much stronger. So if a person falls victim to the Nefesh Bahamas, it can push it down. But if you turn the Nefesh Bahamas, then it's a much stronger tool and energy to elevate. Because they were also kings and they have elevation, but they were kings that fell. But you awaken the positive king within the Nefesh Bahamas, it could take you. The Nefesh Bahamas has that focus. The Nefesh, Rabbi Deitch used to say, the Nefesh of the kiss is slow moving, but the Nefesh of Bahamas actually, he has the focus. It has the focus of being of knowing that the Imfloich of Hatzti. It knows it wants to go to godliness when it gets turned, but it has to turn first. He says, so to a person, when we eat food, like we've learned many times, without eating we don't live. Food doesn't need a person. It means obviously a person can help grow food, but it's not dependent. Because the animal soul is much greater than the godly soul. When the godly soul enters and goes through a life experience with the Nefesh Bahamas, and going through all the difficulties and stresses of Parnasa and Gashmi, physical material things, showing that these are all called the great waters. And when by going through that experience, only then can reach the love of all your might, to believe that has no limit, because it's much stronger than the nefesh halikis. Therefore, therefore that you could go a much higher place. Why? Because before you only had the power of the nefesh halikis, and the nefesh halikis is limited. Nefesh bahamas, the animal soul, is much stronger, and therefore when you go together, and going together is the downside. You're in this world and preoccupied in the complications of this world. But when you turn that whole situation in a positive direction, now you can go much higher. Therefore, therefore, the godly soul now gets the upside of this experience, which is much more than it had before when it was just taking in the ray of the Shekhinah. Okay. And it says, and how do you turn the nefesh of Bahamas? First, you have to restrain it from giving into its instincts, its impulses for pleasure and for worldly things, or for falling victim to anxieties. And then to transform it from darkness to light. And at the highest level, you're really turning the darkness into light. Like we said. And when you turn it, Nefesh Bahamas, it comes from a much higher place than the Nefesh Likis. They just fell down, and therefore right now they're in a bad place, but their power and their source is in a high place. As it says, that they were kings and they died. And when you restrain it, it doesn't die, it gets resurrected. So it says, this is what our rabbis have taught us, top page 5. That's why it's worth it to do one space of tshuva, of real life and repentance in this world and all the world to come. And that's why these are called waters of peace, of calmness. It calms the spirit after the experience. Then that becomes our boat of Noach, the teva of Noach. And then we're able to elevate to the prayer, the words. The word teva means also letters and words. So these are the words of davening, like we said before. Like the Baal Shem Tov says, go into the teva, go into the words of Torah and Tefillah. That by going through the stresses of life, it guides us to the art of Torah and Tefillah, of prayer and learning. Therefore, that's what it means, that the water was elevating higher and higher till it was 15 arm lengths above all space of creation. This is the elevation and the power of the animal soul over the godly soul. When a person is preoccupied in their work, or when they're involved in worldly things. Only through the waters elevating. Then the teva goes on top of the water. Means, how does the teva get lifted up? It's through the commotion and the noise of the world, but it gets lifted up because that lifts up our experience of Torah and Tefillah. Like it says, the teva lifts up only through the water. That's how our prayer gets elevated. But now he says, and this is the Alter Rebbe says, this is the big mistake business people do. They think they think they can't daven so much. They're so preoccupied. They're so busy. They're so stressed. That's all the difference. The more stress you have, the more the teva gets lifted up. You could daven even more than the person who sits in Kollel all day. The person in Kollel all day learns, and then he davens. He davens, he learns. But the stresses of life actually lift up your teva. Because where does the light come from? The darkness, and you're more in the darkness than the person who's not in the world. That's why it's called the spirit of calmness. That's like Shabbos. What's Shabbos? Shabbos, you're resting from your work. Shabbos is the time within the day that you're resting, and you can only rest when there's work. You have to have the 6 days first. So the 6 days of the week, the God's in the world. God created light. There should be Dasha, there should be the grass. These are the days of action. That's when a person rests. But the spirit gets calmed from the resting of the work. Now all the effort gets elevated, and the higher elevation, just like a person who rests from their work. When a person is preoccupied in financial or worldly things, which are called Mayim Rabbim, like we said before, when we transform it and turn it into fuel to be able to daven properly, that's called the spirit of calmness. That's Shabbos within your life. Where does a person daven from throughout the week? Through the fact that we take the spirit of Shabbos. So that's all he says, the lower level of menucha. All this that we talked about, that through difficulties, we get elevation, through difficulties, the teva gets elevated. That's all this lower level of Shabbos. Shabbos is the higher level of Shabbos. Then it's going to only be Shabbos. There's no 7 and 6 days. God promised never to bring it back. Even though the waters are positive, like we said, they could come to be purified. But this Alter Rebbe says a famous line here: not always do we have to go through this cycle of difficulties. Yeah, it's very nice we get pure, but not always. It's not always the time right now for tahara. So too, God promised not to put a person through the difficulties anymore. There's going to be a time when we're not going to have to get elevation through hardships. Even though we explained that through the Mayim Rabbim becomes the light that comes out of the darkness, which is the love with all your might, like we said, through elevating and transforming the Nefesh Bahamas. There's a higher love. It's much greater than the love that comes through, that's revealed through the difficulties. That's a right hand hug from God. It doesn't come from small deicha, right? We have small deicha. Small deicha means the left pushes, that through the pushing away gives us the elevation. That's the idea of the Noach. That's the waters of Noach. But then there's just a hug without the difficulties. That's what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Our makamis will not be taken away. The bris won't be finished. The only level of chesed, that God hugs us from the right side without the difficulties of the left side. And this is what it means. It says that it's going to be Govim even more than Ma'id. It's not Govim very much, but Govim even more than Ma'id. Ma'id is through the left, through the difficulties, we get elevation. That's the lower level of Menucha. The higher level of Menucha is the hug, and that's what we're holding now. We need to get the love from Hashem. We need the hug. We've had enough difficulties, and we just want the hug. That's it. No more good through bad. So when we should have a good week, and should deal with the main Noach, we should get to this higher level of Menucha right away, mamish, today. Laila Tov and a Shavua Tov.